Don't fall. The voice reached me through the haze before the floor disappeared beneath my feet. Deep, calm, dangerous in the kind of way that made people stop talking when it entered a room. I remember the sound of crystal glasses clinking somewhere behind me, the smell of expensive whiskey and truffle oil hanging in the air. Glasses still lay shattered beside table 14, while Manhattan-level wealth stared at us in stunned silence. Somewhere near the kitchen entrance, my manager looked seconds away from cardiac arrest. But nobody stopped Damien Moretti. Nobody even questioned him. The closer I got, the more impossible he looked. 6'4" maybe. Dark tailored suit stretched across broad shoulders. Because for the first time in months, someone looked angry for me instead of at me. Damien Moretti did not blink after I asked him not to get involved. Most men backed away when they realized a woman came with complications, bruising along my skin. The makeup had completely worn off by now. Under the warm lighting, the damage looked worse. Purple fingerprints, yellow fading marks along my ribs beneath the thin fabric of my uniform. Tyler always apologized afterward. Flowers, tears, promises whispered at 3 a.m. while I lay awake, pretending to believe him. I stopped counting the apologies around month 6. Damien pressed the cold pack into my hand. How long? He asked quietly. I swallowed hard. What? How long has he been putting his hands on you? My stomach twisted instantly. Shame always came first. Not pain. Shame. I looked down at the marble floor because it felt easier than looking at the man studying me with frightening calm. It is complicated. No. His voice stayed level. It is not. Silence filled the room again. Heavy silence. Outside, snow hit the windows in soft bursts while somewhere in the distance a siren echoed through downtown. Damien waited without rushing me. That almost made it worse. Tyler used silence like punishment. Damien used it like patience. A year, I admitted finally. Saying it aloud made me feel sick. Maybe longer. Something dark moved behind Damien's eyes, then disappeared before I could fully recognize it. His jaw flexed once. Only once. Does he live with you? I nodded slowly. When did you last eat? The question caught me off guard. What? Food, Claire. My name sounded strange in his deep voice. Careful. Intentional. When did you last eat? I tried to think. Coffee before my shift. Half a breadstick in the kitchen around 6. That was probably it. My face must have answered for me because Damien stood immediately and crossed toward the private bar along the wall. Every movement looked controlled. Efficient. Like he wasted nothing. He returned minutes later carrying a plate of warm pasta from the kitchen downstairs and a glass bottle of water. The smell alone made my stomach ache painfully. Eat. I am not hungry. One dark eyebrow lifted slightly. That was not a question. Despite everything, a tiny exhausted laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Damien froze for half a second at the sound. Not smiling. Just watching. Me differently now. Softer somehow. Like he had finally seen the woman underneath the bruises. I stared down at the steaming plate while my hands trembled slightly around the fork. Nobody had taken care of me in a very long time. Tyler liked control more than kindness. But Damien Moretti looked at my untouched dinner like it personally offended him that I had been starving in the first place. I should have left the moment my hands stopped shaking enough to hold the fork properly. Any smart woman would have. But exhaustion does strange things to survival instincts. It makes warmth feel dangerous because you start wanting it too much. I sat there in Damien Moretti's private lounge eating expensive pasta while snow buried Chicago outside the windows. And for the first time in almost a year, nobody was yelling at me for being tired. Nobody was checking my phone every 10 minutes. Nobody was accusing me of flirting because a customer smiled when I refilled his water glass. The realization alone nearly broke something inside me. Damien stayed across from me while I ate, one hand resting near the untouched whiskey beside him. Most of the food on his own plate had gone cold hours ago. He did not seem to care. His attention stayed fixed on me with that same unnerving focus that made my skin feel too tight. Not lust. Not curiosity. Observation. Like he was piecing together a puzzle he already hated the answer to. You watch people for a living, do not you? I asked quietly after several minutes. One corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. Something like that. You noticed the bruises immediately. Yes. Most people do not. Most people notice, he corrected calmly. They simply choose not to involve themselves. That hit harder than I expected because it was true. My coworkers noticed. The neighbors noticed. Even the cashier at the Walgreens near our apartment noticed when I bought concealer and pain patches at midnight wearing sunglasses indoors. People always noticed. They just looked away because getting involved with couples like Tyler and me felt messy, dangerous, easier to ignore. Damien leaned back slowly in his chair. Your manager said you almost passed out twice before tonight. Embarrassment burned across my face instantly. He talks too much. He was worried. No, I whispered. He was worried about me collapsing in front of your guests. Damien studied me for a long moment before speaking again. And what are you worried about, Claire? The question lodged somewhere deep beneath my ribs. I stared down at the fork in my hands because answering honestly felt impossible. What was I worried about? Rent, bills, Tyler's moods, the sound of keys outside the apartment door after midnight, whether Bruises faded before my nursing classes every Monday morning, whether I would eventually stop recognizing myself completely. Everything, I admitted softly. Silence settled again, heavy but not uncomfortable. Snow continued drifting outside while the city lights reflected against the dark windows like distant stars. Damien finally stood and crossed toward the fireplace built into the farm marble wall. Flames flickered softly beneath the low lighting, painting warm gold across his black suit. He looked less like a businessman there and more like something ancient and dangerous pretending to be civilized for one evening. His phone buzzed once against the table. He glanced down briefly before muting it without answering. You ignored that call for me. The words slipped out before I could stop them. I ignore many calls. People probably hate that. Another almost smile touched his mouth. People are usually too afraid to complain. I should have laughed. Instead, I watched him loosen the cuff of his sleeve slightly, revealing strong tan wrists marked by faint silver scars near the edge of his watch. Old scars. My stomach tightened unexpectedly. Powerful men were not supposed to look human. They were supposed to stay untouchable and clean and impossible. But Damien Moretti carried invisible damage too. He returned to the couch slowly. Where is home? He asked. South Loop. Small apartment near Archer Avenue. His expression darkened slightly. You should not go back there tonight. My grip tightened around the water bottle instantly. I have to. Why? Because all my clothes were there. Because my textbooks were there. Because women like me did not suddenly escape their lives. Because one powerful stranger noticed they were hurting. Tyler will lose his mind if I disappear all night. I whispered before I could stop myself. The second the words left my mouth, Damien went completely still. Not dramatic. Not loud. Somehow worse. The air in the room shifted quietly around him. His voice dropped lower when he finally spoke. And what exactly happens when he loses his mind? My throat tightened. I looked away immediately toward the snowy skyline beyond the windows. That was answer enough. Damien exhaled slowly through his nose while his jaw hardened. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek black phone. One short text. That was all he sent. Somewhere downstairs, I watched two men in dark suits immediately move through the restaurant lobby beneath the glass railing outside. Efficient. Silent. My pulse skipped. What did you just do? Damien locked the screen calmly before setting the phone aside. His eyes returned to mine. Cold. Protective. Certain. I made sure nobody touches you tonight. The worst part was that I believed him immediately. Not because I understood what kind of man Damien Moretti truly was. I did not. Men whispered his name inside expensive restaurants the way people whispered about storms before they hit the city. Dangerous. Untouchable. The kind of power normal people only saw from far away. But when he looked at me and said nobody would touch me tonight, something exhausted inside me wanted to believe it more than logic allowed. My phone buzzed suddenly against the glass coffee table between us. Tyler. The name alone made my stomach knot instantly. 3 missed calls already. Then a fourth lit up the screen before fading into another voicemail notification. Damien glanced toward the phone, but did not reach for it. You do not have to answer. I stared at the screen while my pulse climbed higher with every vibration. Tyler hated being ignored. Last month, he punched a hole through our bedroom door because I left my phone in my locker during a nursing lab. Before that, he accused me of cheating because a classmate drove me home during a thunderstorm. Every memory arrived all at once. The yelling, the pacing, the apologies afterward. My fingers trembled slightly near the phone. Damien noticed immediately. Of course he did. He noticed everything. Claire. His voice softened just enough to cut through the panic rising in my chest. Look at me. I hated how quickly I obeyed. Those pale gray eyes locked onto mine steadily across the warm glow of the lounge. Calm. Controlled. Impossible to read completely. Are you afraid of him? The answer should have embarrassed me. Tyler was not 6'4" with men following him through the city. Tyler did not own skyscrapers or private security teams or command rooms with silence alone. But fear does not measure itself logically. It grows slowly, quietly, until one day your entire life is shaped around avoiding another person's anger. Yes, I whispered. Damien held my gaze for several seconds before nodding once like I had confirmed something important. My phone buzzed again. Then again. Finally, a text message appeared across the screen. Where are you? Another followed immediately. Answer me now. Damien's expression hardened slightly as he read the panic spreading across my face instead of the phone itself. Does he know where you work? Yes. Does he come here often? I hesitated too long. Damien noticed that too. Of course he did. Claire. I swallowed hard. Sometimes. And your manager allows this? Shame heated my cheeks instantly. Tyler can be intense. People usually just try not to upset him. Damien leaned back slowly, his jaw tightening in visible restraint now. You mean they allow him to intimidate you publicly because it is easier than stopping him? The truth sounded uglier when he said it aloud. Before I could answer, another knock sounded at the private lounge door. One of Damien's men stepped inside quietly, wearing a dark charcoal suit dusted with snowflakes along the shoulders. Sir. Damien stood immediately. Tall, calm, terrifyingly composed. Outside. The guard nodded once. He arrived 5 minutes ago. My entire body went cold. Tyler is here. Panic shot through me, so fast my ribs ached sharply when I stood too quickly from the couch. Damien crossed toward me instantly, one hand steadying my elbow before dizziness could knock me sideways again. Easy. I cannot let him see me here. My voice cracked embarrassingly. You do not understand how he gets when he thinks someone is interfering. Damien's gaze darkened. I understand perfectly. The guard remained silent near the doorway waiting for instructions while snow whipped harder beyond the windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Somewhere far below, headlights crawled through icy streets while my entire life threatened to crash into this room. Tyler was downstairs, angry, looking for me. Damien adjusted the cuff of his black suit calmly, like none of this surprised him. Like difficult men arriving uninvited happened every day in his world. Maybe it did. Keep him in the lobby, Damien told the guard quietly. No scenes. No touching. Yes, sir. The guard disappeared again. I stared at Damien in disbelief. You cannot just control people like that. One dark eyebrow lifted slightly. Watch me. Fear tangled strangely with something else then. Something warm and unfamiliar. Safety. The realization terrified me more than Tyler waiting downstairs. Because safe people were dangerous too. Safe people made you lower your guard. Safe people made you forget survival rules you spent years building. Damien turned toward me again slowly. You are staying here tonight. My breath caught. Damien. That was not a request. His voice stayed low. Controlled. But underneath it now sat something absolute. Protective in a way I had never experienced before. Then his phone buzzed once in his hand. He glanced down at the screen briefly before looking back at me with unreadable eyes. Your boyfriend, he said calmly, just threatened one of my employees downstairs. The room suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. The first thing I noticed was that Damien did not raise his voice. Not once. Most men got louder when they were angry. Tyler certainly did. His anger filled rooms before he even touched a doorknob. But Damien Moretti became quieter instead, and somehow that felt infinitely more dangerous. He slipped his phone back into his jacket pocket with slow precision while the firelight reflected across the sharp angles of his face. Outside the lounge windows, snow swirled against downtown Chicago in thick white sheets, burying the streets beneath ice and silence. I should go downstairs, I whispered quickly. Panic twisted hard in my chest now. If I explain things, Tyler will calm down. Damien looked at me like I had just said something heartbreaking. Claire. My name sounded heavier this time. Tired almost. Men like that do not calm down. They escalate. I opened my mouth immediately to defend Tyler out of instinct before shame flooded me just as quickly. Damien saw that too. Of course he did. He crossed the room slowly until he stood directly in front of me again, close enough that I could smell cedarwood and winter air clinging to his black coat. His presence should have felt intimidating. Instead, it felt grounding in a way I did not understand. Has he ever apologized and then blamed you for his behavior afterward? The question hit so directly I forgot how to breathe for a second. Damien watched the answer settle across my face before I even spoke. That is what I thought. I looked away immediately toward the fire because humiliation burned hotter than fear sometimes. You do not know me. His voice stayed calm. I know enough. The room fell silent except for the crackling fireplace and the distant muffled noise of the restaurant downstairs. Somewhere below us, wealthy people continued eating expensive desserts while my entire life cracked open quietly inside a private lounge above the ballroom. Damien reached toward the coffee table and handed me the unopened bottle of water again after noticing my hands trembling. Small detail, tiny observation, yet somehow it made my chest ache unexpectedly. Tyler only noticed things when they irritated him. Damien noticed everything. Drink, he said softly. I obeyed before realizing I was doing it. My phone buzzed again. Another text. Come downstairs now. Then another immediately after. I know you are up there with him. I slid down my spine instantly. Damien's eyes sharpened the second my expression changed. Show me. No. Claire. Please. My voice cracked. Embarrassingly. You will just make this worse. Damien held out his hand patiently. Massive hand. Steady hand. The same hands that caught me before my head hit marble hours earlier. Finally, I handed him the phone. His expression did not visibly change while reading the messages, but something colder settled behind his eyes. How does he know my identity? He asked quietly. Everyone in Chicago knows who you are. A humorless smile touched his mouth briefly. Unfortunately true. Another message appeared while he still held the phone. If he touches you, I swear to God. Damien locked the screen before I could finish reading the rest. You are not going downstairs. Damien. No. The firmness in his tone silenced me instantly. He stepped away then, moving toward the windows overlooking the storm-covered city below us. One hand slid into the pocket of his tailored slacks, while the other loosened his tie slightly for the first time all evening. He looked exhausted suddenly. Not physically. Something deeper than that. Like carrying power came with a weight nobody else could see. Do you know what your problem is, Claire? He asked without turning around. I stared at his broad silhouette against the snowy skyline. I am afraid to ask. You think enduring pain makes you strong. The words landed directly against old wounds I spent years trying not to examine too closely. Damien finally turned back toward me slowly. It does not. It only teaches cruel people how much they can get away with. My throat tightened painfully. Nobody had ever spoken to me like that before. Not my professors. Not my friends. Certainly not Tyler. Because deep down, everyone treated my bruises like temporary accidents instead of symptoms of something breaking apart slowly inside me. Damien treated them like an injustice. The knock at the door came again, this time sharper. One of his security men stepped inside immediately. Sir. Damien's attention shifted instantly. What happened? The boyfriend refused to leave. My pulse spiked again. Is anyone hurt? The guard glanced briefly toward me before answering carefully. No, miss. Then his eyes returned to Damien. But he is causing a scene in the lobby. Security from downstairs is nervous. Damien exhaled once through his nose. Calm. Controlled. Terrifyingly calm. Then he adjusted the sleeve of his black suit jacket and looked directly at me. Stay here. Fear tightened instantly in my chest. Where are you going? His gaze darkened slightly. To remind a man downstairs that you are not something he owns. I should have stayed on the couch like he told me to. Smart people listened when men like Damien Moretti gave instructions in that calm voice. But the second the private lounge door closed behind him, panic started clawing through my chest hard enough to make breathing difficult again. Tyler downstairs. Damien walking directly into whatever disaster waited in the lobby. Snow hammering the windows 20 floors above downtown Chicago while my entire body screamed that everything was about to spiral out of control. I lasted maybe 30 seconds before I stood up. Bad idea. Pain flared sharply along my ribs the second I moved too fast, forcing me to grab the edge of the marble fireplace for balance. The room still smelled faintly like cedarwood and whiskey and Damien's expensive cologne. Warm. Safe. That terrified me more than anything else tonight. I moved toward the lounge doorway carefully, my black flats silent against the dark hardwood floor outside. The private hallway beyond the lounge curved toward an overlook above the main restaurant lobby downstairs. Golden light spilled upward from the ballroom beneath me, while string music drifted faintly through the building. For one surreal second, the elegant atmosphere almost made me forget why my pulse felt ready to tear itself apart. Then I heard Tyler's voice echo upward from below. Angry, sharp, familiar enough to make my stomach twist instantly. I know she is here. I froze near the railing, overlooking the lobby below. Tyler stood near the front entrance in his dark winter jacket dusted with melting snow. Pacing across the marble floor, while two of Damien's security men blocked the elevators calmly. Other restaurant guests kept their distance now. Nobody wanted involvement in whatever this was becoming. Tyler looked exactly like he always did during one of his moods. Blonde hair messy from shoving his hands through it repeatedly. Eyes too bright. Jaw clenched so tightly I could see the tension from 20 feet above him. He looked human to everyone else downstairs. Frustrated boyfriend. Worried partner. Nobody but me noticed the warning signs hidden underneath. Then Damien stepped into the lobby. Silence moved through the room almost instantly. Tyler stopped pacing the second he saw him. Even from above, the contrast between them felt unreal. Tyler carried chaos loudly. Damien carried control so completely it bent the atmosphere around him. Black tailored coat, broad shoulders, calm expression untouched by the tension flooding the lobby. He descended the staircase slowly while every person nearby seemed to instinctively move aside. Damien stopped several feet away from Tyler. Hands relaxed at his sides. Completely still. Tyler spoke first. "Where is Claire?" Damien's voice remained low enough that I almost could not hear it from above. "Safe." One word. That was all. Tyler laughed harshly under his breath. "Look, I do not know what kind of game this is, but she is my girlfriend." Damien tilted his head slightly. "Is she?" The question landed harder than shouting ever could have. Tyler stepped forward immediately before one of the security men blocked him with an outstretched arm. "Tell her to come downstairs right now." Damien's expression never changed. "No." Cold panic spread through me because Tyler hated hearing that word more than anything. He looked toward the upper floors suddenly, scanning the railings until his eyes found me standing above the lobby. The second he spotted me, his entire face changed. Relief first, then anger, then something possessive and ugly that made my pulse spike instantly. "Claire." His voice echoed upward now. "Come here. Right now." My body locked automatically. Survival instinct. Years of conditioning packed into two simple commands. Damien noticed it immediately. Of course he did. Even from downstairs, his eyes flicked upward toward me briefly before returning to Tyler. "She is not coming with you tonight." Tyler laughed again, but there was no humor in it. "You think you know her because you picked her up off the floor for 5 minutes?" Damien took one slow step closer. Calm, controlled, terrifyingly composed. "I know enough." The entire lobby seemed to hold its breath. Snow whipped violently against the front glass doors while expensive chandeliers reflected gold across polished marble floors beneath them. Tyler pointed toward me suddenly. "Claire, tell him this is none of his business." My mouth opened automatically. Nothing came out. Because standing there above them both, I realized something horrifying. For the first time in over a year, I did not want to go home with Tyler. Damien looked up at me then. Gray eyes steady. Certain. No pressure. No command. Just quiet understanding that somehow made tears sting unexpectedly behind my eyes. Tyler saw my hesitation too. His face darkened instantly. "Claire." Warning filled my name now. Damien's voice cut cleanly through the tension before Tyler could speak again. "You should leave." Tyler looked back toward him sharply. "Or what?" Silence. Heavy silence. Damien adjusted the cuff of his black coat, once before answering in that same dangerously calm voice. "Or you are going to learn that frightening her in my presence was a very poor decision." Tyler had never looked small to me before that night. Angry, yes. Unpredictable, constantly. But never small. Fear changes your perspective until one person's moods become bigger than entire buildings. Bigger than your own thoughts. Bigger than your future. Yet standing in the glowing lobby beneath Damien Moretti's cold, steady gaze, Tyler suddenly looked exactly like what he truly was. A man used to controlling people weaker than himself. Nothing more. Snow slammed against the tall front windows while silence stretched painfully through the restaurant lobby. Wealthy guests pretended not to stare from the edges of the marble hallway. Staff members froze near the reception desk, holding silver trays and folded linens, too nervous to move. Tyler shifted his attention back, toward me upstairs, jaw tight, with barely controlled frustration. "Claire, stop embarrassing me and come home." Home. The word twisted sharply inside my chest because suddenly I realized our apartment had not felt like home in a very long time. Home should not make your stomach knot every time keys rattled outside the door. Home should not teach you how to cover bruises before work or memorize which floorboards creaked loudest after midnight. Damien remained completely still near the center of the lobby, one hand resting loosely inside the pocket of his black coat. Calm, effortless, dangerous in a way Tyler clearly recognized now. "She already made her choice," Damien said quietly. Tyler laughed harshly. "You think she belongs here with you?" Damien's eyes lifted briefly toward me again before returning to Tyler. "No." One word, then another. "I think she deserves peace." Something in my chest cracked open painfully at that. Peace. Such a simple thing. Most people never even noticed when they had it. Tyler scoffed loudly. "You do not know anything about us." Damien took another slow step closer. "I know she flinches when men raise their voices." The entire lobby fell silent again. Tyler's face hardened instantly. "Watch your mouth." Damien ignored the warning completely. "I know she apologizes before speaking, even when she has done nothing wrong." My throat tightened painfully because every word was true. Damien's voice remained low and controlled, but each sentence landed like a spotlight exposing parts of my life I spent months trying to hide from everyone around me. "I know she looked terrified when your name appeared on her phone." Tyler glanced upward toward me sharply. "Claire, what did you tell him?" Shame hit automatically. Fast. Familiar. The same shame abusive people plant inside you, until protecting them feels more natural than protecting yourself. I opened my mouth immediately to minimize everything again. Tyler is just stressed. Tyler does not mean it. Tyler had a hard childhood. But the words refused to come out this time. Maybe because Damien was still standing there looking at me like none of this was my fault. Tyler started toward the staircase suddenly before Damien's security stepped smoothly into his path again. The movement made me tense automatically. Damien noticed that too. Of course he did. "Enough," Damien said quietly. Tyler looked ready to explode now. Red-faced, breathing hard, desperate to regain control of a situation slipping through his hands in front of strangers. "This is between me and my girlfriend." Damien's expression finally changed slightly then. Not anger. Something colder. A woman covered in bruises is not a relationship problem. It is a protection problem. Tyler froze. So did I? Nobody had ever said it aloud before. Not like that. Not without softening the truth to make it easier to swallow. Protection problem. The words echoed through my head painfully because suddenly my entire relationship sounded different under that light. Tyler pointed upward toward me again. "Claire, tell him to back off." Every eye in the lobby turned toward me then. My manager near the hostess stand. The nervous security guards. Damien's men standing silent near the elevators. Even Damien himself looked up slowly toward the second-floor railing where I stood trembling above them all. For the first time in years, somebody was waiting to hear what I wanted instead of deciding it for me. My heartbeat thundered painfully in my ears. Tyler's face twisted with warning the longer I stayed silent. Damien remained completely still. No pressure. No command. Just patience. God, that almost hurt more than fear. My fingers tightened around the cold metal railing while snow blurred against the windows behind me. Then quietly, so quietly I almost did not recognize my own voice, I spoke. "I do not want to go with you tonight." Tyler stared at me like I had slapped him. Shock replaced anger for half a second before something darker rushed in underneath. "Claire." Warning again. Familiar. Sharp enough to make old fear rise automatically inside my chest. But Damien stepped forward before Tyler could say another word. Not aggressively. Not loudly. Just enough that Tyler's attention shifted away from me entirely. Damien's voice dropped lower when he finally spoke. "You should leave now." Tyler looked ready to argue again before one of Damien's security men quietly handed him a folded black umbrella near the entrance doors. The gesture confused everyone for half a second. Even Tyler. Damien adjusted the cuff of his coat calmly. "Because the storm outside Chicago tonight," he said softly, is the only thing you should be worried about when you walk out of my building. Tyler left 10 minutes later without another word to me. That almost scared me more than the yelling. Silence from him usually meant something worse was waiting later. I stood frozen near the second-floor railing long after the lobby doors closed behind him, watching snow swallow the black shape of his car beneath the glowing Chicago streetlights outside. The storm had turned violent now. Wind screamed between skyscrapers while thick snow buried the sidewalks in uneven white drifts. Downtown traffic crawled through the night like exhausted rivers of red brake lights. Somewhere far below, Tyler disappeared into all of it. Damien remained downstairs near the center of the lobby with one hand still resting inside the pocket of his black coat. Calm, completely untouched by the confrontation that left my hands shaking against the railing upstairs. His security men moved quietly back toward their positions while restaurant staff slowly returned to work pretending they had not witnessed the most terrifying moment of my life unravel in front of crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Then Damien looked up at me again. Come downstairs, Claire. No command this time. Just steady certainty. I moved carefully toward the staircase, ribs aching with every step while exhaustion settled deeper into my bones. Halfway down, I realized Damien had stayed exactly where he was waiting until I reached the bottom floor. The detail hit unexpectedly hard. Tyler always walked ahead during arguments, fast enough that I had to chase after him apologizing before he disappeared completely. Damien waited. The second I reached the final step, his large hand hovered briefly near my elbow without fully touching me, giving me balance without pressure. You should sit before you fall over again. Despite everything, a weak laugh escaped me. That is becoming a theme tonight. Something softer flickered briefly across his face at the sound before disappearing beneath control again. Damien guided me toward a quieter sitting area near the private elevators where the restaurant noise faded into distant piano music and muted conversations. A fire burned inside another marble fireplace nearby, warming the dark leather chairs arranged beneath towering windows overlooking Michigan Avenue. Snow painted the city silver beyond the glass. I sank into the nearest chair carefully while Damien remained standing for a moment studying me with those unreadable gray eyes. You are still shaking. I looked down at my hands. He was right. Adrenaline, I whispered. Damien reached for a folded wool blanket resting across the back of the chair beside me and draped it carefully over my shoulders before sitting opposite me. Such a small gesture. Such a devastatingly gentle one. My throat tightened unexpectedly again. Nobody had tucked blankets around me since my mother died when I was 17. Thank you, I said quietly. Damien leaned back slowly, broad shoulders relaxing slightly for the first time all night. You do not need to thank me for basic human decency. I almost told him he had no idea how rare that felt these days. Instead, I stared toward the storm outside, while warmth slowly seeped through the thick blanket around my aching body. He is going to hate me after tonight. Damien's expression remained unreadable. Good. I blinked. What? Fear should belong to the person causing harm, Claire, not the person surviving it. Silence settled softly between us again. Not heavy this time. Almost peaceful. Somewhere nearby, jazz music drifted quietly through hidden speakers while snow continued falling over Chicago in endless white sheets. Damien loosened his tie completely now, the dark fabric hanging slightly open at his throat. Without the ballroom crowds around him, he looked less like a feared businessman and more like an exhausted man carrying too many responsibilities alone. My eyes caught faint shadows beneath his own. When do you sleep? The question slipped out before I could stop it. One dark eyebrow lifted slightly. That obvious? You look tired. A quiet laugh escaped him then. Low, brief, real enough to make my stomach flutter unexpectedly. Most people say I look intimidating. You definitely look intimidating. Another flicker of amusement crossed his face. But I hesitated before answering honestly. Not tonight. The room went still for one strange, suspended second. Damien's gaze held mine steadily while firelight reflected softly across the sharp angles of his face. Dangerous men were not supposed to look at women gently. They especially were not supposed to look at broken women like they still mattered. My phone buzzed suddenly against the small table beside me, shattering the fragile quiet instantly. Both of us looked down. Unknown number. My pulse tightened immediately. Then another message arrived before I could move. You think he can protect you forever? Fear crawled coldly down my spine. Damien saw it happen in real time. The softness vanished from his expression instantly, replaced by something colder and infinitely more dangerous. He held out his hand toward the phone calmly. Claire. My fingers trembled slightly as I passed it to him. Damien read the message once before his jaw hardened almost invisibly. Then he stood slowly to his full height beside the firelight and looked toward the storm beyond the windows. It appears, he said quietly, your boyfriend still does not understand boundaries. The strange thing about safety is that your body does not recognize it immediately. Even wrapped in a warm blanket beside a marble fireplace high above downtown Chicago, my nervous system still expected disaster. Expected yelling. Expected another cruel message lighting up my phone screen every few minutes. Expected the sound of Tyler's keys rattling against our apartment door while I rehearsed apologies I did not mean. But Damien Moretti stood near the windows with my phone in his large hand, and somehow the fear felt different now. Smaller. Not gone. Just no longer controlling every breath inside my lungs. Snow continued pouring over the city beyond the glass, turning the streets below into rivers of white and gold beneath the streetlights. Damien stared down at the threatening message for several silent seconds before finally setting the phone carefully on the table beside me. You are exhausted, he said quietly. You need sleep. I let out a weak laugh. I do not think sleep is happening tonight. His gray eyes lifted toward me again. Steady. Calm. It will. The certainty in his voice should not have comforted me as much as it did. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders while the warmth from the fireplace slowly eased the ache in my ribs. The adrenaline crash was hitting now. Hard. My entire body felt heavy and shaky at the same time. Damien crossed the room toward me slowly, then stopped beside the leather chair without crowding me. Even that detail mattered. He never cornered me, never reached for me suddenly. Every movement felt intentional, careful, like he understood fear better than he wanted to admit. There is a guest suite upstairs, he said. You can stay there tonight. Panic flickered automatically across my chest. I cannot impose like that. One dark eyebrow lifted slightly. Claire. My name sounded softer now. Almost tired. You collapsed in my restaurant 6 hours ago after working yourself into the ground while hiding injuries from a man who clearly enjoys frightening you. You are not imposing. Emotion climbed unexpectedly into my throat so fast I had to look away toward the fire. Nobody had defended me like this before, not without wanting something in return. Damien noticed the sudden silence instantly. Of course he did. What? He asked quietly. I swallowed hard. Nothing. That is not true. My fingers tightened around the edge of the blanket. The words felt embarrassing suddenly. Childish almost. I forgot what it feels like when someone is kind without keeping score. The room went completely still. Firelight flickered softly across Damien's face, while something unreadable shifted behind his eyes. Sadness maybe. Regret. I could not tell. He looked away first toward the storm outside. That should not surprise you as much as it does. Maybe not. My voice came out smaller than intended. Damien loosened his watch slowly, setting the silver piece onto the nearby table beside my untouched water bottle. Tiny details stood out strangely tonight. The faint exhaustion beneath his eyes. The silver scars near his wrist. The way powerful men sometimes carried loneliness like another expensive accessory nobody else noticed. You know, I whispered carefully. You are not what I expected. A quiet breath escaped him. Almost a laugh. That makes two of us. I blinked. What did you expect from me? Damien looked directly at me then, and for the first time all night, the terrifying control slipped just enough for honesty to show underneath. Someone who stopped fighting for herself a long time ago. My chest tightened painfully. Maybe I did. No. His answer came immediately. Certain. You are still here. Silence settled between us again. Softer now. Outside, snow battered the windows while somewhere deep in the city sirens echoed faintly through the storm. Damien finally stepped closer and crouched slightly beside my chair, close enough that I could see the pale gray of his eyes clearly beneath the firelight. Dangerous eyes. Gentle eyes. Listen to me carefully, Claire. My heartbeat stumbled once. Nobody is going to hurt you tonight. The words wrapped around something fractured inside me, so gently it almost hurt. I nodded before realizing tears had slipped quietly down my cheeks without permission. Embarrassed, I looked away immediately and wiped them quickly with the edge of the blanket. Damien pretended not to notice. Another tiny kindness. He stood again slowly to his full height before offering me his hand. Huge hand. Steady hand. The same hand that caught me before I shattered against marble floors hours earlier. I stared at it for one long second before placing my trembling fingers into his. Warmth closed carefully around my hand, without pressure. Without ownership. Just support. Damien helped me stand slowly while the city glowed beneath falling snow outside the windows. Then his thumb brushed lightly against my knuckles once before he guided me toward the private elevator upstairs. Come on, he said quietly. Let me show you what peace feels like for one night.